For about a decade, the most powerful people on Earth all shared one nervous little habit. In the middle of a meeting, in the back of a limousine, at a state dinner, a hand would slide under the table and a thumb would start moving across a tiny plastic keyboard. Presidents did it. Chief executives did it. When Barack Obama entered the White House in 2009, he fought his own security staff for the right to keep doing it. The device was so addictive that the world stopped calling it by its real name and started calling it the CrackBerry. At its peak, this one Canadian company had 85 million people hooked, a stock worth $83 billion, and a grip on the pockets of the entire business world. And then, a phone with no keyboard at all walked onto a stage in San Francisco. 5 years later, BlackBerry was effectively gone. This is how the company that owned the smartphone forgot to look up.
Take a seat. This meeting has one item on the agenda: how the most addictive product in the world became the most disposable. There is a particular tragedy that only ever strikes the winners. It does not visit the companies that fail early. It waits patiently for the ones that succeed so completely that they can no longer imagine losing. BlackBerry did not stumble because it was poor or careless or run by fools. It stumbled because it was right for so long that being right became the only thing it knew how to be. Two engineers from a quiet Canadian town built a machine that put email in a coat pocket, and for a while, they held something close to a monopoly on the attention of the powerful. Governments ran on it. Wall Street ran on it. And then a competitor changed the definition of the word phone overnight, and the men at the top looked at the future, examined it carefully, and decided it would never catch on. Allow me to introduce a company that was destroyed not by its weakness, but by the memory of its own success.
The story begins in 1984, in Waterloo, Ontario, a small university town 2 hours west of Toronto. A young engineering student named Mike Lazaridis, with a childhood friend, started a tiny electronics firm in a rented space above a bagel shop, and gave it a grand and hopeful name: Research in Motion. For years they did modest contract work, barcode readers and small electronic parts, quietly getting good at wireless data. Then Lazaridis fixed on a single idea that everyone else had missed. Everybody was trying to shrink the telephone. He wanted to shrink the office. In 1992, a sharp, aggressive businessman named Jim Balsillie mortgaged everything he had to join, and the company found its shape. Lazaridis ran the technology, Balsillie ran the money and the deals, and the two of them became co-chief executives, a rare arrangement where one company had two kings. In 1999, they launched the first BlackBerry, a little black slab with a screen and a keyboard so small you typed with your thumbs. It did one thing, and it did it better than anything on Earth. It pushed your email to you, instantly, wherever you were. To a lawyer, a banker, a politician, this was not a gadget. It was a leash they were thrilled to wear. Email arrived the second it was sent, and suddenly being unreachable felt like falling behind. The device spread through the corridors of power like a rumor. By 2006, BlackBerry was a phenomenon. Webster's New World Dictionary named CrackBerry the word of the year, a joke about how the little device had turned serious adults into twitching addicts who could not stop checking. Research in Motion was one of the most valuable companies in Canada, and it controlled almost half of the American smartphone market. And then, on the 9th of January, 2007, a man in a black turtleneck walked onto a stage in San Francisco and held up a smooth rectangle of glass with no keyboard, no buttons, and one home key: the iPhone. Inside BlackBerry's headquarters, the reaction was not fear. It was relief. Lazaridis, a brilliant engineer, looked at the iPhone and saw everything wrong with it. The battery would die in a day. The glass keyboard would be miserable to type on. Worst of all, its full internet browser would pour so much data through the cellular networks that, as reported in the definitive account of the company's fall, he warned it could bring those networks to their knees. It was, in his expert judgment, an impractical toy. And Balsillie, the dealmaker, said it out loud. Asked by reporters about the iPhone, the co-chief executive called it, quote, "one more entrant into an already very busy space," and brushed off the idea that it changed anything for BlackBerry at all. Hold that sentence. It comes back to bury them.
Let me pause the tape, because the mistake here is more subtle than it looks. Lazaridis was not wrong about the facts. The first iPhone genuinely did have a weak battery, a clumsy keyboard, and an appetite for data the networks could barely feed. Every specific criticism he made was, in that moment, technically correct, and it did not matter in the slightest, because Apple was not selling a better version of what BlackBerry made. It was selling a different thing entirely, a pocket computer that happened to make calls, and it was betting that batteries would improve, networks would grow, and customers would forgive a bad keyboard for a piece of glass that could become anything. BlackBerry judged the iPhone as a phone and won the argument. Apple was not building a phone. That is the whole trap of expertise. The better you understand the thing that made you great, the harder it becomes to see the thing that will replace it.
For a year, nothing terrible happened, and that was the poison. BlackBerry kept selling record numbers of devices to its loyal corporate customers, and the men at the top took the flat sales of that first iPhone as proof they had been right. But underneath, the ground was shifting. Ordinary people, not just executives, were falling in love with the iPhone, and in 2008, Apple opened the App Store, and a phone became a place you could pour 1,000 other businesses into. BlackBerry had no answer to that. When it finally moved, it moved in a panic. Late in 2008, it rushed out a touchscreen phone of its own, the BlackBerry Storm, built to a hard deadline for a major carrier. The idea was clever. The whole screen physically clicked down when you pressed it, so it would feel like a real keyboard. In practice, it was slow, buggy, and frustrating, and a huge share of them were returned. Its own carrier partner was reportedly furious. Instead of an iPhone killer, BlackBerry had shipped a monument to its own confusion. A company that understood the old world so deeply, it could only imitate the new one badly. The keyboard that had been its greatest strength was becoming an anchor, and it kept building phones around it while the rest of the world learned to type on glass. After that, the fall had its own gravity. Every year the numbers looked worse. Developers built their apps for the iPhone first, then for Google's Android, and BlackBerry last, or not at all. And a smartphone without apps was starting to look like a museum piece. In October of 2011, the service went dark for 3 days across the world, and millions of the faithful discovered they could live without it after all. The famous two-king structure finally broke. In January 2012, Lazaridis and Balsillie stepped down as co-chief executives, handing the wheel to a successor with the car already sliding. The company bet everything on one last throw, a brand new system called BlackBerry 10 and a phone, the Z10, that finally worked the way a modern phone should. It arrived in early 2013, years too late, into a world that had already moved on and forgotten to care. That autumn, BlackBerry announced it was writing off almost $1 billion of unsold phones, sitting in warehouses that no one wanted to empty, and cutting roughly 4,500 jobs, about a third of everyone who worked there. A company that had once held nearly half of the American market now held close to nothing. The presidents and the bankers and the addicts had all quietly slid a smooth glass rectangle out of their pockets and left the little keyboard behind for good. The world had put the CrackBerry down, and this time, it did not pick it back up.
Minutes recorded. Before we adjourn, one question for the room, and do leave your verdict in the comments below. BlackBerry's leaders were not lazy, and they were not stupid. They were experts, and they lost precisely because they trusted their expertise. So I put it to you, when the thing that made you successful and the thing that will make you obsolete arrive wearing the same face, how on earth are you supposed to tell them apart? And be honest, because most of us in that boardroom would have agreed with Lazaridis. The keyboard felt like the future because it had always been the future. That is the quiet danger I would leave on the table tonight. Success does not make you blind by accident. It makes you blind on purpose, because the view backward is so pleasant that you forget to turn your chair around. Somewhere a company you admire today is holding a glass rectangle of its own and calling it a toy. Next meeting, a man who watched his workshop bombed in the war, then flattened by an earthquake, and who answered by bolting little surplus engines onto bicycles in the rubble of a broken country, and turned that into the largest engine maker on Earth. How Honda rose from the ashes of Japan. Subscribe. Attendance is taken.